Hello everyone and welcome to your video lesson for today. Today's topic will be all about plant nutrition. We will be focusing specifically on macro and micronutrients. So before we start, kindly get your self-learning module on plant nutrients with a competency. Explain the components of plant nutrition. If you have someone to help you for today's discussion, thank you very much for guiding your child or your learner in today's discussion. If you are on your own, don't worry because I am here to guide you throughout the lesson. So again, welcome to our video discussion for plant nutrition on the macro and micronutrients for plants. Before we start our discussion, let us first set our learning objectives for today. So at the end of this module, you should be able to list elements or compounds crucial for plant development. You should also be able to explain whether a particular element is essential or not. Third, you should be able to differentiate macronutrients and micronutrients. And last, you should be able to describe the effects of nutrient deficiencies in plants. In your self-learning module, there is a pre-test with 5 items. You can start answering them. I've created this pre-test in order for me to identify what you already know about the topic and what should be learned from the topic. Furthermore, the results of this pre-test will be my baseline after the module in order for me to understand whether you have learned something or not. Alternatively, you may also answer the pre-test in the Kahoot application. The link is in the screen. And write the pin 027397888. After playing in the Kahoot application, you should be able to see your score together with the scores of your classmates. So, before we start our formal discussion, I first have an activity for you. This is warm-up activity. You can also see this warm-up activity in your self-learning module. The direction reads, by now you already know that plants are autotrophs or are species that can create their own food. But have you ever wondered how they eat their food and how nutrients from their own food are processed? Are plants just like humans that also need additional nutrients aside from those that they consume? So in this simple activity, I want you to observe the drawing provided here, which shows a human with proper nutrition and a human with nutrient deficiency. I want you to observe the difference between the two drawings. How does the human with proper nutrition look like? How does the human with nutrient deficiency look like? After that, I want you to draw your own version on plants with proper nutrition and plants with nutrient deficiency. How do you think would plants look like if they have proper nutrition, and how do you think plants would look like if they have nutrient deficiency? Afterwards, I want you to reflect or answer the following process questions found in your self-learning module. The first is, what is the difference between an organism with proper nutrient intake and an organism with nutrient deficiency? You can base your answer for this question on your own drawing. Next, aside from the food that plants make, where else do you think they get nutrients? So we all know that plants are autotrophs. They create their own food through the process of photosynthesis. But where else do plants get other nutrients? So I want you to also reflect on that and then write your answer on your module. Lastly, if nutrient deficiency has negative effects on plants, do you think nutrient oversufficiency also has negative effects? So if you believe that nutrient deficiency has a negative effect on plants, do you also believe that overnutrition or oversufficiency of nutrients on plants also has negative effects? So after that, we will now proceed with our formal discussion. So just like humans, plants also have basic needs that need to be met. Plant cells need essential substances, collectively called nutrients, in order to sustain life. Plant nutrients may be composed of either organic or inorganic compounds. Remember that plant nutrition is the study of the chemical elements and compounds necessary for plant growth, plant metabolism, and their external supply. In its absence, the plant cannot complete a typical life cycle, or that the element is part of some essential plant constituent or metabolite. So these nutrients that are essential to plants are called essential nutrients. So plants only require water, light, and about 20 elements to support its survival. These 20 elements are our so-called essential nutrients. And in order for an element to be classified as essential, it has to comply with the following criteria. First, a plant cannot complete its life cycle without that element. Next, no other element can perform the function of that element. And lastly, the element is directly involved in plant nutrition. You must also remember that the plants cannot simply gather the elements from the ground. The element or the essential nutrient must be broken down first into its basic form. These are called ions. So we have two types of ions. We have the cations and we also have the anions. So the cations are the positively charged ions and the negatively charged ions are called anions. Also, plants cannot use an element that is not in the proper form, even if it is present in high concentrations in the soil. So, for example, we have the nitrogen. The nitrogen cannot simply be absorbed by the roots of the plants. If you can still remember in our biogeochemical cycle, we have the nitrogen cycle, wherein the nitrogen from the atmosphere has to undergo fixation in order for the plant to use it in its metabolism. There are also several organisms or species that help the plants break down these essential nutrients in order for it to be used for its survival. First, we have the microorganisms or microbes which break down organic compounds into inorganic compounds in a process called mineralization. Fungi also enable some plants to take up phosphorus by increasing the size of the roots and providing more soil to root contact. Essential nutrients are also divided into two types. We have the macronutrients and the micronutrients, which will be the focus of today's discussion. Even if we call these nutrients as macro or micro, one is not more essential than the other. They complement each other and they both help the plant in its survival. So let us now proceed with our first type of essential nutrient, which is the macronutrients. So macronutrients are the nutrients that are needed by plants in larger quantities than macronutrients. There are 9 elements that are classified as macronutrients for plants. They are further categorized into three. First is the structural macronutrients, the primary macronutrients, and the third is the secondary macronutrient. Let us further discuss these categories. So the first category of macronutrients is the structural micronutrients. There are three classified elements for structural macronutrients. These are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And the structural nutrients are elements found and are beneficial to the structure of the plant. So you may have noticed that the structural macronutrients, the carbon, hydrogen, and the oxygen, are also the same elements that make up a sugar. And we already know that plants create their own food in the form of a sugar or glucose. Furthermore, there is also a sugar that is called cellulose. So cellulose is the main structural component of the cell wall and is composed of three structural nutrients of the plants, the carbon, the hydrogen, and the oxygen. Furthermore, the cellulose and other carbohydrates created by the plant provide strength to the cell walls, stems, and leaves and are also sources of energy for the plant and organism that consumes the plant. So that is our structural macronutrients. The second category for macronutrients is the primary macronutrients composed of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. These primary nutrients are essential in biochemical processes, plant nutrient content, and the integrity of the plant. If you can still remember our biogeochemical cycles, there are also different cycles for the primary macronutrients. We have the nitrogen cycle, we have the phosphorus cycle, and we also have the potassium cycle. These three primary macronutrients are not readily available to the soil. Hence, these nutrients are usually supplied by fertilizers. We need The primary macronutrients still need to go fixation in order for it to be readily available for the plant. Also, being the primary macronutrients, these essential nutrients are often required in higher concentration than those of the secondary nutrients. The deficiency of these nutrients can contribute to reduced plant growth, health, and yield. So let us go into the specifics of the primary macronutrients. First is the nitrogen. Nitrogen is found in chlorophyll, nucleic acid, and amino acids. Next, phosphorus is an essential component of nucleic acids and in the ATP system, or the energy currency of the cell, the ATP, or the adenosine triphosphate. The last primary macronutrient is the potassium. It plays a significant role in plant metabolism, photosynthesis, and drought tolerance. The last category for macronutrients is the secondary macronutrients composed of yet three elements: the sulfur, the calcium, and the magnesium. Secondary nutrients are needed for plant health and metabolism. They are needed in smaller amounts than primary nutrients, but nonetheless, they are still very essential for the plant survival. The next type of essential nutrient is the micronutrients. This is sometimes called trace elements. Micronutrients are essential nutrients needed only in small quantities yet are still crucial for the plant's survival. There are 11 identified micronutrients. These are boron, chlorine, manganese, iron, zinc, copper, molybdenum, nickel, silicon, and sodium. So that is our quick discussion for the macro and the micronutrients. The main difference, again, you have to remember this, that the main difference between macro and micronutrients is the amount or the quantity needed by the plant for its survival. So macronutrients is needed in higher concentrations, micronutrients is only needed in smaller quantities. In your self-learning module, there are two process questions after the discussion for the macro and micronutrients. The first is, what is the main difference between macronutrients and micronutrients? And then the second is, considering that both types of nutrients are essential to plant survival, are macronutrients more important than micronutrients? Defend your answer. So I'm pretty sure that we have not missed any important information to answer these two process questions. We now proceed to the next part of this topic, which is the nutrient deficiency and oversufficiency of plants. So, just like humans, plants also experience nutrient deficiency. Aside from this, plants also experience oversufficiency of nutrients. Both conditions affect plants and are usually visible in leaves. Deficiencies in macronutrients cause greater effect than those of micronutrients. This is because the amount of macronutrients needed by the plant is higher than those of micronutrients. So now we will discuss the effects of the deficiencies and oversufficiencies of macronutrients in plants. So the first macronutrient is nitrogen. So if nitrogen supply is insufficient, leaves will turn yellow, and if nitrogen supply is oversufficient, leaves will turn dark green. As you can see here in the illustration presented, there are two colors of leaves. One is yellow, the one below, and the one above is dark green. This is because uh, the plants in the illustration above has an oversupply of nitrogen, while those below have an insufficient supply of nitrogen. The next macronutrient is phosphorus. So if phosphorus supply is insufficient, leaves create a purple or reddish appearance. And if phosphorus supply is oversufficient, induced zinc can occur through biochemical processes. In the illustration presented here, you can see that the leaves of the plants are turning into red. This is because there is an insufficient supply of phosphorus. The last primary macronutrient is potassium. So if potassium supply is insufficient, leaves will have a yellow margin and will crinkle. And if potassium supply is oversufficient, there will be a reduced magnesium intake in the plant. So in the illustration presented here, you can notice that the leaves are already crinkled and the margin of the leaves are turning into yellow. So that is our brief discussion on nutrient deficiency and oversufficiency. I have only provided the macronutrients, the primary macronutrients, because we can easily observe the effects of the nutrient deficiency of macronutrients in plants as compared to those of the micronutrients. So now I want you to further explore on the possible effects of nutrient deficiencies in plants. You may visit this link that is presented now in your screen. The same link is written in your self-learning module. After playing in this interactive learning material, I want you to now answer the three process questions for this activity. First is, what have you noticed with the plant leaves when a specific nutrient is deficient? Do you think it is normal for a plant to experience nutrient deficiency? Why or why not? And last is, as a student, what can you do to avoid plant nutrient deficiencies? I have also prepared a quick activity that you can do in your own community. I want you to go to your backyard or simply observe plants within your community and always remember to wear your personal protective equipment and to follow the safety protocols for COVID 19. So, the first step is for you to look for plant leaves that you believe are not the same color as their usual appearance. So, if you see a plant that is red in color, which is supposed to be green, kindly collect the leaf of that plant. With your understanding of the concept of macro and micronutrients, complete this table, with the necessary information needed. An example is already provided to you. So, for example, your collected leaf is from a mango tree. So, you will have to write mango in the name of the plant. The usual color of its healthy leaf is green, but you have collected a leaf that is color yellow. I want you to observe, and I also want you to hypothesize what could be the possible effect onto why the leaf has turned yellow. You also have to observe its appearance if it is normal. And then after that, I want you to write what nutrient or element is deficient or oversufficient in that plant. In this case, this is nitrogen because the green color of the leaf turned yellow. And then nitrogen is a macronutrient type of essential nutrient. I want you to find at least 5 plants in your community. Afterwards, we also have 2 process questions in order for you to further grasp the information for this activity. First is, how were you able to identify what essential nutrient is deficient or oversufficient in the plant? Next is, do you think its environment affects the amount of nutrients in the soil? So I also want you to predict whether the surrounding of this plant also affects its nutrients. So that's it. That is our discussion for today. And now we proceed with the summary. First, remember that plant nutrition is the study of the chemical elements and compounds necessary for plant growth, plant metabolism, and their external supply. There are currently 20 identified essential elements in plants, and in order for them to be classified as essential, they have to meet 3 criteria. First is, a plant cannot complete its life cycle without that element. Next, no other element can perform the function of the element. And last, the element is directly involved in plant nutrition. Essential elements or essential nutrients are divided into 2 types. First is macronutrients, and the second is micronutrients. Macronutrients are elements or compounds needed by plants in large quantities. This is further categorized into 3. First is the structural macronutrients, the primary macronutrients, and the secondary macronutrients. Structural nutrients are those that are essential and are found in the structure of the plants. These are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Primary nutrients are needed in higher quantities than secondary nutrients. The primary nutrients are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The secondary nutrients are needed only in small quantities yet are still required by plants for survival. The secondary nutrients are sulfur, calcium, and magnesium. Micronutrients are elements or compounds needed by plants in small quantities. They are sometimes called trace elements. There are 11 classified micronutrients. The main difference between macronutrients and micronutrients is the amount or quantity needed by plants. And plants also experience nutrient deficiency and oversufficiency, and these conditions create adverse effects on the plants and are usually visible in leaves. And now, in order for me to know whether you have learned something in this module, I want you to answer the same set of questions that is found in your post test. These are 5 items. But again, you can also try answering these 5 questions in the Kahoot application using the same link and pin in order to have an interactive and fun learning experience. So that's it. That is our discussion for today. I hope you have learned something from our video discussion, and also you have fun answering the different activities in your self-learning module. If you have any questions, any clarifications, or if you also want to add any information regarding our discussion for today, kindly comment it down below so I can respond immediately to your queries. So again, thank you very much for being here today. I hope that you are safe and you have another yet amazing school year to come.